actually. So we're doing this together. Anyway, I just wanted to say welcome and thank you so much for joining us, Cynthia. This is a really special time for connections and to just hear about someone else's journey and the challenges they've overcome, or the facilitators that really supported growth and your journey. So I'm just so pleased to have you here and appreciate you spending time with us, even if it's by Zoom. And hopefully I'll get to meet all of you in person in the future at some point.
All right, thank you, Dr. B. This will be our last speaker for spring 2021, is Cynthia Begay. So please welcome Cynthia Begay. She is Hopi, Navajo, and Chicana, and is a third-year PhD student in preventive medicine at USC Keck School of Medicine. She is pursuing her dissertation research in cancer disparities among tribal communities in California using the California Cancer Registry. She has worked in tobacco control for over 5 years and continues her work through program evaluation with the local tribal program. She is a fellow with the Tribal Researchers Cancer Control Program, advisory board member for the California Tribal Epidemiology Center, health promotion practice board member, and served as a commissioner in 2019 for Los Angeles City and County Native American Commission. She was recently awarded the 2020 Inspired Natives Award from 8th generation for her community leadership and as the artist and owner of Hopi Girl Silver. All right. Cynthia, let me pull up your presentation.
Great, thank you so much for helping me with my slides. So, hi everybody, good afternoon. My name is Cynthia Begay. I'm Hopi, Navajo, and Chicana, and today I'll be talking about my journey in navigating graduate school and publishing in the peer review process. And I have a lot of pictures throughout my presentation just to kind of keep it entertaining. So here's a picture from the Hopi Reservation off of First Mesa, and the view is from Palaca Village, but I'm actually from Second Mesa, so we can go to the next slide. And I just wanted to do a quick land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge my presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Gabrielino and Tongva peoples. I'm here in LA doing my graduate school work. Okay, next slide. So, yat Cynthia Begay she Kesani dene nishle Nakai dene Bashishtin, Torachini Dashiche, Nakai dene Dashinelli, Akotego dene Atsan nishle. So, hi everybody again. My name is Cynthia. I'm Hopi Sun Forehead Clan, born for the Mexican people. My maternal grandfather is Navajo from the Bitterwater clan, and my paternal grandfather is Mexican. And here I just have a picture of me. I think I was about 21 years old at the Shiprock Indian Health Service Clinic doing shadowing work when I was still in my pre-med journey. And it was a really great week out there, shadowing in the ER, in the OBGYN. I got to shadow the chief medical officer. So it's just really awesome to see firsthand rural medicine. Next slide. And so today, again, I'm going to be talking about my career in research and just kind of what it was like going through, trying to get to the next graduate program and trying to make it through undergrad. But my story really always starts with my mom. My mom was born in Shiprock, raised on the Hopi Reservation in Second Mesa. We're from the Sapalavi village. And she had me as a young mother, 18 years old, single mom, and she was the first in our family to go to college. So as you can see, I think I'm about 8 or 9 here. My mom had just graduated from CSUB. And it was a really great moment in our lives. It really changed our lives, her getting her college education. And I think, what inspired me just to even go to college was really being there literally by my mom's side. She would take me to class. I lived in the Cal State Bakersfield Library with her. And she just really inspires me all the time, to do better. So next slide. And so I'm not sure who's in the Zoom room right now. I do see some folks who are a little more advanced in their career than me. So hopefully this isn't too redundant. But for folks watching, if you're still an undergrad or even a high schooler navigating, I'll be going through, the whole spectrum of my journey. So it really started in undergrad. I went to the University of California, San Diego. I started out as pre-med bioengineering. I, to be honest, had no interest in engineering, but it was the only degree that said pre-med on it. And so I thought I had to be a pre-med bioengineer to go to medical school. It was a very huge learning curve for me. I just knew I wanted to go to medical school. I didn't even know, what an MCAT was. I really didn't know, what it took to apply for medical school, which is what I learned while I was an undergrad. But eventually, I graduated with a bachelor's of science in psychology. I learned that you can do a different major and still be eligible to apply for med school, which is great. In the upper left-hand corner, those are my RA days, and my boyfriend said I very much look like an RA in that picture, showing my Triton spirit. And one of the first presentation or poster presentation I did at first science conference I ever went to is SACNAS, which is a Society for the Advancement of Chicanos and Native Americans in Science. And actually, I'm so happy that Mark Emerson is on the call because he was the one who inspired me to go to this conference. I had never heard about going to scientific conferences, and I heard from a fellow NARC student about his experience going to SACNAS, which inspired me to eventually apply for the travel scholarship and present my work there. So sorry, Mark, I actually think I cropped you out of that picture on the bottom just to show my first poster, but Mark is standing right there to the side watching me present my poster. So thank you for supporting me. And then eventually I went on to apply, well, during my undergrad, the first 2 years I worked in the cafeteria. I needed to, I funded myself to go through college, and so I needed a job, and I had previously worked in food service in high school, but my path to research really changed when I became an ARCH student, which is a California NARCH, so Native American Research Center for Health. And that's a pipeline program that helps students like me, get into research if we're interested, provide us resources to go to grad school like GRE training, and just meet folks who are more advanced in their career who can help mentor us. And I've including links, so Carolina, you can disseminate this. I tried to do it so other folks can access it later. But through the NARCH program, they were the ones who first funded me to do research. They really believed, we know our Native students need to make extra income. We know, we need them to do research or extracurriculars that will really build toward their application. So they provided a research stipend for me to begin in my first lab, which is the one I'm presenting in the poster in the bottom left corner. And so that really just opened a lot of doors for me. Eventually, my 4th and 5th year, I became at the time was called a Minority Access to Research Career Scholar, but now I saw it's called Maximizing Access to Research Careers, which is the MARC program. And that was a 2-year program that I believe paid for my tuition, paid a monthly stipend, gave us training funds or traveling funds to go to scientific conferences. And the really great thing about this program is that the second summer of our time in that program, we had to go to a different university and do a summer research program, which I hadn't explored prior to that. And so through that, I applied to the 4 Directions Summer Research Program, which is the picture in the top right corner. And that one is hosted through Harvard Medical School. As you can see, we're a pretty small cohort. And all of my friends in the picture, I think all but me and one other are in medical school. So I'm really happy. The lady next to me, she's a lawyer now. And then I'm, of course, in the PhD program in public health. So that was just a really great exposure. It really, I think the biggest part that we all took away from that program is trying to battle that imposter syndrome. And the program is also led by a Native doctor who went to Harvard Medical School. So it was really, I felt so inspired after. And I think that was the first time I really felt like I belonged in the science field and as a researcher and future scientist. Next slide. So since this is also about my journey to publishing, through the 4 Directions program at Harvard and in my lab, we had a lab component where we worked about 40 hours a week in a lab, on top of different shadowing activities and different academic enrichment activities. In my lab through that program, I got my first publication. And as you can see, I'm pretty buried in the paragraph of names there, but it's okay because I was very, very excited to be a part of this paper. And I include the slide of pictures because my contribution to this paper, I got really lucky at the time I entered the lab. They had to revise and resubmit for this paper. And the PI said, hey, if you can count these little blue dots on that second row of this picture and quantify these cells, I forget which type of cells they are, we'll get you in the paper. And even though they only show 4 slides, I think there was probably over 100 pictures of these slides, and I went through and counted, and those finger-like shapes, I had to make sure, to see how many were in each of those. So that was my contribution to the paper, and I was included in the paper. So I'm really just honored and excited that Dr. Frederberg believed in me even back then. So next slide. So after I graduated from undergrad, my goal was to just take one gap year. I was going to take one gap year, get my last pre-med requirements finished, go to med school, and live happily ever after. Well, my 1-year gap year turned into 3, which is completely fine with me, in retrospect. I was really at a crossroads between, do I still want to pursue medical school? I really, really enjoyed and I felt like I thrived in research. So, maybe a PhD would be good for me. But I always knew I wanted a master's of public health. So during my gap years, I decided, okay, let me pursue this master's of public health. And if I'm completely in love with public health, then I'll, continue and try to apply and go the PhD route. So during my gap years, I had gone to a community college to finish my organic chemistry and physics classes that I needed. I also needed to work. So that's when I first got to work with some native community-based organizations. A couple include the San Diego American Indian Health Center, which is the urban Indian health center in San Diego, and then the Indian Health Council, which is an IHS clinic in North County, San Diego, that serves a consortium of 9 tribes. And during my time there, it was really great. At Indian Health Council, I got to be involved again with NARCH, but on the research component. So they have community-based projects that they do out in that area. In the top right corner, I have a poster presentation from the American Public Health Association talking about prescription drug disposal among American Indians and Alaskan Natives. So this was some of the first research that I saw that was really addressing the opioid crisis in our communities. And so this was a really great experience for me to, do the advocacy, education, and awareness around prescription drug disposal, present at a national conference with this. And it was just really a catalyst that helped me apply for my Master's of Public Health program. And at the bottom here is just one of our events. I really like this picture because, we were out in Los Coyotes. It's the most rural reservation of the consortium. There's no internet or cell phone service. It was a really, really cold day. And of course we weren't prepared. So, and it snows up there. Typically it's how cold it gets. So we had, even my coworker in the back, we had bundled ourselves up with a scarf over our head. And there's our little Indian Health Council. Well, not so little, but big Indian Health Council mobile van that we would travel in. Another project I worked on through NARCH as well was a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. So this project was really great in providing a partnership between the Children's Hospital down in San Diego with our clinic on the Rincon Reservation in Valley Center to get folks, more referrals and services that were needed for the children who needed those services for FASD. Next slide. So then my next step in this process was a Master's of Public Health at San Diego State University in Epidemiology, which, also Mark did, and I got to see him go through his career. So I feel like I definitely followed in his footsteps as well. Some of the research programs that were really beneficial to my journey at this point, I was a National Congress of American Indian Native Health Graduate Fellow. So this was a 1-week experience out in DC. We got to see the great work that NCAI does. We got to meet the what is it, the Senate branch for Native Americans. So we got to meet the folks there. We got to talk to technical advisors for the IHS regions. And this was right around the time when the Affordable Health Care Act was, still getting passed. So we really got to see what type of advocacy and work happens on the Hill for our communities. And this was, I think, my first experience where I got to see just the large, you know, just the platform that is out there in DC, what you can do on a national level, because prior to this, I had only been working on the local level. And then another part of my journey was doing an international research experience. So the Minority Health International Research Training was a really awesome program. It was a 2-month experience. For my site was in Uganda, but there are sites all over the world, in South America. I think we had a couple of sites in Africa, but my site focused mostly on the PEPFAR program, which is a partnership with the Department of Defense to keep our allied militaries healthy from HIV and AIDS. And so this was an experience for me to go out to the different military sites and see how the HIV clinics worked out there and the types of care they had. And I had decided to do a small evaluation project in one of the districts called Mbale, and just see, with the mother to child transmission program, how could their partners or the males in the household really support the mothers in getting the, and the medicines they need to help prevent HIV in their unborn child. And so this was one of those focus groups that we did. We did a focus group with the males, focus group with the women, and we were in a village that actually didn't speak Swahili, which was a common language out there, or English. And so the statistician in the district helped out and was able to speak, their village's tribal language. So I really, really appreciated that experience. And it was just a real eye opener for me. And I also wanted to kind of mention, with all this academic talk, with all of, this time we set aside to do research or classes and things like that, I felt it was really important to stay connected to my culture. I come from a family of, silversmiths, pottery makers, weavers, and I really wanted to continue that legacy. So I had started Hopi Girl Silver during my time in the master's. I took a jewelry class in San Diego, and I was really encouraged by my family and friends to, showcase my work. I felt very shy. It felt just, like a hobby to me, but really, I love the community that I've created online, and connecting with other folks like me who grew up with our elders in the family making jewelry, and then seeing that the present day. So that was just something I started back then as well. Next slide. Which brings me to my time at the University of Southern California. So I did take another gap year after my master's of public health, but I was very lucky during my master's to meet Dr. Clarity Soto, who's now my primary mentor. In my last year of my master's programs, I had linked up with her and her team. They did tobacco regulation science research, and hers was primarily focused on tribal communities throughout California. And through this, I was able to apply, and I received the NIH Diversity Research Supplement, which is a really great supplement if you haven't heard of it. It's typically 1 to 2 years, and it can pay for your tuition, it can pay for travel expenses to conferences, any supplies you may need, like a laptop for graduate school, and it carves out a little niche in the program or in the project so that you can focus on, what you might be interested in. And for me, it was continuing the interviews and research that we had done in the field. And it was a really great experience. So now that I'm a third year doctoral student in the Department of Preventive Medicine, I'm now working on tribal medicated assisted treatment projects, which are the two community report outs that I pictured in the slide. And like Carolina mentioned, I'm going to be focusing on cancer disparities among tribal communities in California. I do have a grant application in the works, so it looks like it might be more focused towards HPV vaccine uptake among tribal families in California. But what I really appreciate about Dr. Soto is she really has the lens of, we want to make sure that the communities that we're working with really benefit from our research. And as you know, a lot of peer-reviewed journals are lock and key. You have to have a subscription. I know when I was in an academic institution, I pretty much had to rely on reading abstracts and just hoped, some of them were free. But these community report backs, while we do still publish our work and submit manuscripts and things like that, these are more comprehensive report backs that are free to community. I have the link at the bottom. If we have multiple, I think we have 4 or 5 now, but these are the 2 I was most involved in. So one was just our statewide needs assessment. And I think we did over 200 interviews with folks around the state who work with communities who would benefit from medicated assisted treatment. We also did a large survey assessment. And then the second one, from that report, we saw there was a really big gap in addressing, our brothers and sisters who are experiencing homelessness. So we did about 20 to 25 interviews throughout the state of California with natives experiencing homelessness and, major cities throughout California about their experiences in accessing services and recommendations. And so both of those reports were state funded and are, have been handed off to DHCS. So another program I'm a part of is another NARCH, the Northwest NARCH, which is, I think, located in Portland. I'm part of their Tribal Researchers Cancer Control Fellowship Program. And this program has been really great. It has been virtual this year, but typically they do spend 2 weeks in Portland and then 1 week in the fall, or 2 weeks in the summer, 1 week in the fall, and they get to hear from guest speakers, learn about the F-31 application process. But really the most enriching part of this is just meeting Native researchers in cancer control. I think this was just such a great moment for me because I'm pivoting to cancer disparities. And so that's actually through that program, I'm hoping to apply for a 1-year research project looking at HPV vaccine uptake. And another program that I felt was really pivotal to my career and actually deciding, wholeheartedly that I wanted to go for the PhD was a minority training program in cancer control hosted at UCLA. And this has been over a 20-year program. My mentor, Dr. Clarity Nasoto, participated in it. And it really brings all of the students like myself who are from underrepresented areas with researchers who are also, from underrepresented backgrounds as well, and talking about their journey to grad school, just reaffirming why they need researchers like us in the field. And it was, I really encourage folks, if you're able to apply for it, to go for it, because I just really appreciated, it really centered our cultural experience through this program versus, just what are the steps do you need to get along with everybody else to a research program. Next slide. So this, again, my talk is also about publishing. And so this was the journal that I had my first author paper. It was with that tobacco regulatory science work that I did in my master's program with Dr. Soto. And the paper itself is called Cigarette and E-Cigarette Retail Marketing on and near California Tribal Lands. We were part of an FDA-funded supplement doing health equity and justice works for communities, affected by tobacco use. So I really enjoyed my time with Health Promotion Practice Journal, and in large part because of the editor-in-chief, Dr. Rowe. She has been such an advocate and ally for our communities and for myself and my professional development. After this paper was accepted, I had a chance to meet her at APHA, and she is just such a bright sunshine of energy. She will light up any room she goes into, and if she has an idea, she is 0 to 100, ready to execute it. And so when I met her at APHA, it was, I think it's typically around the first week of November. So it had already Native American Heritage Month that started. But when we got to talking, she just had this light bulb moment, like, let's do a Native collection, of paper, let me see what I can do with the publisher to get a handful of these papers accessible, and let's showcase them for Native American Heritage Month. She knows that our communities would benefit most from these publications, and that oftentimes we have that red tape of accessing it. So in 2019, we had done our first centering Native and Indigenous Voices collection. I think we had about 4 papers that were free, including mine, but luckily mine is always going to be free because it was part of the FDA funded supplement. But it really grew, and we were able to showcase 8 articles this past year in 2020. We're able to provide these articles for free for the month of November. And it was really nice that the second time around, because the first time it was just me and her, me providing contacts, just making the Twitter posts for her and things like that. But this time around, we had more lead time. So we were able to bring in the authors of the papers we were showcasing and really, have them lend their networks to us as well to get this out. So it's an annual event now, and hopefully it'll grow each year and we'll have more papers that are available. Another aspect of this, which Dr. Rowe and Dr. Soto are very like-minded in this way, is just how do we disseminate our research to the best of our abilities and to get, just cast the widest net. And one of her ideas was doing a podcast featuring, I think it was eight authors for the first pilot season, and I was one of them. But it was 20 minutes each in a 3-part series. And the podcast first goes into getting to know the authors personally and professionally. And then the second one is just talking about the paper and breaking down the article. And the third one is going beyond the article and just, what are the broader implications of the work. So the podcast is available anywhere you get your podcasts. I just included the Spotify link for ease of access. But my first episode has already been released. So it's talking about intersectionality. And a lot of this talk is just, my journey to graduate school. The second is about the paper. And the third is about exploring tribal sovereignty. And there's some contact info for the HPP journal in the bottom right-hand corner. But the other neat thing about, this experience in general is that I was invited to be on the editorial board as a student representative. And so this is really teaching me just kind of the inner workings and what happens in the background with the peer review process. How does the relationship between this journal and Sophie, the publisher, and Sage and all of that work? And I'm just really happy to be a part of this journal's editorial board because they really are pushing the bounds and the limits of what peer-reviewed publication looks like. What does it mean to disseminate information? And my role in this board, I'm hoping, is to have more Native-led research submit papers to this journal. We really need it. We really need more of our research out there, and I know we're doing a lot of great work. So I'm just really happy to send out abstract calls, get folks in touch with the editor-in-chief, and do what I can to get our papers looked at and accepted. Next slide. And so this brings me to just a kind of random but amazing accomplishment by this team. So the Health Promotion Practice had just announced their paper of the year, which features Dr. Catherine Kim's work with California's Karuk tribe, tribal youth citizens. It's a free paper, so it's made free forever thanks to the publisher. So I included the link there. And they were also featured on the HPP podcast once they had announced it. So I think it was released last week, but it's really great. Dr. Kim brings on also the youth leaders to be interviewed in the project, and you really get to hear the ins and outs of how they were able to accomplish the great work that they did in their community. So I really encourage everyone to listen to the episode and take a look at the paper. Next slide. So like I said, I'm not sure who's in the Zoom room, but I just wanted to give some general tips for publishing. One of the surveys for our editorial board, it was an evaluation survey, just kind of getting a pulse check on who's on the board. But one of the questions on there was, are you a first generation publishing author? And I never really thought about that. I know we always talk about first gen in terms of like going to undergrad, but for me, I'm first generation of my family to pursue graduate school. I'm the first in my family to publish. And so I really, reflecting back on it, to me, publishing was a very scary thing. It almost seemed impossible, or just kind of like you hit the lotto if you're in a lab that was ready to start publishing the data. But in retrospect, I think I could have done a little more advocacy for myself had I known. So these are just some tips I feel like I've learned along the way. First and foremost is advocate for yourself. If you're interested in publishing, ask your mentors. That may be the PI of the project manager, if you can contribute as an author. And authorship looks different at different points in your career. So if you're an undergrad or just beginning in your research career in the lab, you can offer to write the reference page. I've been included on paper just to make sure everything was in APA format and all the in-text citations are correct. You can also do the methods, talking about how the project was done, and or the introduction section with the literature review. And also, first authorship usually requires the heaviest lift. So one of the sayings in our department is first author, first draft. You're really spearheading how this paper comes together and is formed, with the senior author kind of guiding you as well. Don't be discouraged. Publishing an article often takes more than a year, or 1 or more years. That goes from writing the article to submitting, to hearing back, all the revise and resubmits, and eventually being, featured in that print article or online. Also, rejection is a redirection, so please don't give up. You may submit to one journal that it may not even fit with, the type of work that they do or the style or the sound. Shop for another journal, take those comments and edits from the reviewers if you get them, and make it better for the next one, but don't give up because the work is really needed. Another thing, which I just done actually a couple months ago, so still learning, start your Google Scholar profile. This is really nice. I got to, it has a running list of all your publications, even some of your presentations. So I see some of my APHA abstracts and titles on there as well. You get to see a metric of how often you're cited, things that academia at least cares about. Register for I always call it ORCID, but I know I'm saying it wrong, but the ID, it links you to all of your papers. And if you notice in some of the papers that are published, some authors have a little green circle with an ID next to it as a little icon, and that's what that is. And don't forget to update your CV with your publications. And when I was first starting, especially applying to grad school, I would include the manuscripts that were in preparation, just to show, the admissions committee that you are working towards getting that publication. But, don't feel like because it's not in print that you can't include it, to let folks know. And I think that's my last slide. Yep, perfect. So I wasn't sure if folks had questions. I was really hoping we can have a dialogue, hearing about where you are in your journey. If you have any questions about my journey or need any recommendations, Mark is also really great and can answer those too. But yeah, thank you all for attending and listening.
All right. Thank you, Cynthia. I really appreciate you coming on here. This is a time for questions. So anyone can unmute themselves and ask the questions, or put it in the chat if you feel shy. Yeah.
I guess I can start us off with some questions. Cynthia, great presentation. I always love your energy and just enthusiasm for the work you do, and it really shows in when you talk about your journey, and it's been so awesome to see, and I'm just really proud of you. So yeah, my question is just what's next? What are you what's kind of in the works for the next 5 years or so, or even longer? Like what overall do you see yourself getting into?
That's a great question that I have to reflect for myself. Just kidding. Well, my 5-year plan is definitely to graduate. I am rounding at my 3rd year, so I have a couple more years. But school-wise, it's one of my goals is to propose or do my qualifying stuff by the end of the calendar year. And so that's why it's really important for me to pick a focus, pick a track, and that's why I'm really excited to start pursuing HPV vaccine uptake. I think post-graduation, I'm still not entirely convinced I want to go into academia, as surprising as it may sound. I know that especially other Native researchers in my position, sometimes we feel like we can make a bigger impact in community outside of academia. And so that's why I'm also exploring for myself, what does Dr. Soto is providing a great role model for me of what it looks like to be in academia and do that work, which is why the meter is tilting a little more toward it in favor of it versus when I entered the program. But I think, I just see some of the amazing work the Tribal Epidemiology Centers are doing, tribes themselves are doing. And I just really love kind of being in the thick of it and being right there on the ground doing the work. So I'm still unsure about what I want to do after graduation. So I definitely keeping my options open, but I think, it's always going to be working with tribal communities. It's going to continue doing research. Um, and most likely I'll stay in California, but we'll see. I've always wanted to go back home and do some work too. So, hopefully I can do that as well at some point. I was going to ask, do we have any folks in undergrad on the call? Undergrad or thinking about graduate school and on the fence?
Actually, yeah, I am. Hi. Sorry, I don't have my camera on. I got my COVID vaccine yesterday, so I'm not feeling like too well. But I want to say thank you because you've done so much work and it's just impressive to see your journey and how far you've come. So yeah, I was also thinking about going into medical school, but then I found public health and I think research is something that I might want to consider doing. So I guess what are your steps to prepare for like a master's program, or like your advice for preparing and considering what programs are out there and stuff? Like what was your journey into getting into a master's?
That's a really great question. I actually didn't cover it in my slides because I felt like there was so much to go over. But, undergrad for me was really hard. I did really well in high school. I didn't have to study. I didn't do homework on the weekends, and I graduated a 4.3. Well, when I got to undergrad, it was a big wake up call. I really wasn't I'll say the public school system didn't really prepare me very well for college, but I got on academic probation my first quarter, and it wasn't I wish I could say, oh, it was because I was partying and I cared. No, I just didn't know how to study, and as much as I tried, I really didn't do well. And so, that dug myself into a little hole. Luckily, I never got back on academic probation, but doing the pre-med track was really hard for me. And so I ended up graduating with a 2.7. And I just felt, like no grad school is ever going to accept me. Like no one's ever going to want me because I have this horrible GPA. And so I knew I had to do other, and I'm not sure if you're in the same situation, but I'm just specifically speaking to my journey, is that I had to think about, what do I need to do to make sure my application is strong to show these folks that I'm capable of doing the work, which, was partly working in, with the jobs that I did that were more health oriented. But one thing that I was advised by my mentor, Dr. Brodeen, is to take one class. It's called Open University. So you can just pay out of pocket for one class, take the class, do well in it to show them that you're able to keep up with that rigor. So that was just unique to my experience. And I pinched my pennies together and paid that $1,000 to take my first grad epidemiology course from San Diego State. Luckily, with hard work and everything, I got an A in it, and I got that professor to write me a letter of recommendation to go to that program. I was accepted conditionally, so I had to do well my first semester, get a certain GPA to be fully accepted. But for me, I think it was mostly soul searching and then having the desire to do it. And that was really fueled by my work experiences. So if you feel, what the job you're holding now or things like that really aren't, kind of filling your bowl and getting you ready for that, there's always volunteer opportunities, to try to fit something in to get that experience. And then I think I heard you say getting ready for research. Research can happen, I think, almost at any point, even if you are just contributing maybe 4 or 5 hours a week to a lab. If you're interested, reaching out to the PI or the postdoc or anybody on that lab team of the research that you're interested in would be really great. And the nice thing is now everything's virtual. So doing something like data entry or coding or, little tasks, not so little tasks, but, tasks like that you can do virtually. So I definitely encourage you, if you find research that interests you, just reach out to the folks there and see how you can help. I mean, everybody appreciates that kind of help.
Thank you so much. And honestly, yeah, everything, or at least most of the things, because I was also on academic probation when I transferred from community college over to the U of A. And it was very discouraging for me to be placed in that situation and then trying to get out of it, which I did. But it was definitely difficult. So to hear, to know that someone as successful as you went through that, it gives me hope. And for that advice, thank you also for that. information. And just again, thank you for your talk. It was really enlightening, and it's really inspiring to see that you've come so far, and I'm hopeful to see what you'll do next.
Thank you. Yeah, I think another part of it is just fear. I was very apprehensive about applying to probably 90% of those programs I had shown you all. And as Carolina and Mark know, we have a mentor, her name's Geneva, and she is just like our second mom and out there for NARCH. And, she was the one who told me, what's the worst that they can say? No. And that's it. Like, if you apply and they say no, that's the worst that can happen. And I'm really grateful I got that advice early on, because I would have rejected myself before, potentially hearing that rejection from them. So just remember that when you're applying and navigating your way. Yeah, do we have any other folks on the call who are thinking about grad school? Maybe you're already in your master's, thinking about a PhD, interested in research?
I think I have a question. So I could never really think that I would want to do doctoral or a PhD. I'm just getting into my master's. Sorry, my name is Tashina Mashane. And I want to sort of know, what is that transition from master's program to a PhD? Because for me, I just see the publications and the writing that my friends are doing, and I'm just like, absolutely not. I still get my B's and D's mixed up, so why would I want to pursue it? So what would you say is the I guess you could say the rewarding thing from coming from a master's program to your PhD?
I would definitely say, especially with the writing part, like even in my master's, I felt kind of scared to publish. Like it's all a black box, and it wasn't until I got into my PhD program where I felt like, for me anyways, there was a lot more opportunity to publish. But I think for the transition from master's to the PhD is like, just really affirming that you like doing research, you're really interested in just doing research in itself. That'll help you out in your PhD program. But I think with the PhD program, there is a little more autonomy and more responsibility. You get to potentially lead projects. You have a lingering pressure to publish, but it's not, at least in my program, as hard as I thought it would be. I thought, I'd have to get 15 publications before I leave this program, and I have to publish, so many times a year and all of that. But it just really hasn't played out that way for my cohort, at least. But I will say with the writing aspect, you have a team of authors. All of those people who are listed hopefully are contributing to that paper one way or another. You also have folks who are great editors, who can go in there and make it nice and polished. And so by the time you're seeing these published articles, it's gone through the ringer. Even, sometimes when we send the manuscript to a journal, sometimes we get comments back that's like, hey, you need to look at your sentence structure. Hey, you need, there's some grammatical errors, just because, with all of the, the track edits and things like that on Microsoft, it's, some things slip through the cracks. But I will say with practice, it really helps with the writing. I feel like now I have a way better handle on just kind of how to structure a published article versus in my master's program. And so, yeah, but just remember, you always have your team behind you, and just find those teammates who are good writers and good at grammar, and that'll help you out as well. We all play to our strengths. So that's the beauty of working in a team for those kinds of things.
Awesome, thank you.
Mm-hmm.